This video will look at Act 5, Scene 2. We have just in Act 5, Scene 1, seen Lady Macbeth's madness scene, and that is analysed quite widely, but this, again, is a much ignored scene in Macbeth. However, it does have some lovely imagery in it and some lovely references to power and some lovely dramatic devices used by Shakespeare that I'm going to look at here. We have some Scottish rebels here, Angus and Lennox, we have met before, and they are here discussing the fact that they are now going to join forces with Malcolm and Macduff, who, as we know, are currently travelling up from England. In the opening line of this scene, they refer to the English power. Instead of naming a king, they simply refer to the English power. Shakespeare, being an English playwright who was writing for an English king in 1602, has used this really cleverly at the start here. He is making England sound like the saviour of this situation. We know that the king at the time of Macbeth, the king that was harbouring Malcolm, was Edward the Confessor, known as a very pious religious man. However, leaving out his name here universalises the experience of England as a saviour, but also potentially would please James I. He is an English power. He is the English power, that determiner there, the. So it's a lovely way to open the scene and very clever dramatic device used by Shakespeare. The second dramatic device that is used by Shakespeare in this scene is the two references to Birnam Wood. We know from the witches' prophecies that Macbeth has been warned about Birnam Wood coming to Dunsinane, and Angus and Lennox do a beautiful job here through Shakespeare of setting the scene and foreshadowing that Birnam Wood is going to be a very important battleground and that Macbeth's end is coming, because we know that Birnam Wood is going to be the turning point for him. Lovely dramatic device there used by Shakespeare. Thirdly, a lovely dramatic and linguistic device used by Shakespeare from this point onwards in the play is that people on the opposite side of Macbeth, Macbeth's enemies, do not refer to Macbeth by name. We know from Harry Potter, for example, that referring to the villain as a euphemism and avoiding using their name increases the sense of threat and mystery around them and makes them sound more sinister. And Shakespeare does this here. Malcolm, Macduff, Menteith here refer to Macbeth as the tyrant instead of King Macbeth. It also disrespects him refusing to use his name by referring to somebody without using their name, disrespects them, dehumanises them. And that's what Shakespeare is doing for the rest of this play. A further interesting thing in this scene is the use of clothing imagery. We saw this earlier in Act 1 when Macbeth was first given the title of Thane of Cawdor. He asked, "Why have you dressed me in borrowed robes?" In Shakespeare's day and in medieval England and Scotland, the importance of clothing as showing your social status would not have been lost on Shakespeare's audience. And Macbeth was aware of the importance of clothing as symbolising his social status. And Caithness and Angus here. Caithness says that Macbeth is unable to buckle the belt of his rule. So Scotland and the rebels in Scotland have got too big for Macbeth and he can no longer buckle his belt. Or potentially this is a metaphor suggesting that he has lost control over Scotland. If you can't buckle your belt, you've lost control. And then secondly here, Angus, we have his robes, his titles hang loose about him like a giant's robe upon a dwarfish thief. So this image here that Macbeth is wearing clothes that are too big for him. The title of King of Scotland is too big for him and it fits unnaturally on him. And referring to him here as a dwarfish thief is a really interesting image, again, to dehumanise and belittle Macbeth. Finally, we have the image here of Macbeth's madness. These are rumours about Macbeth's madness, his secret murders sticking on his hands. We've just seen Lady Macbeth obsessively washing her hands. Will these hands ne'er be clean? All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. The motif of hands throughout Macbeth is really important, and we see it again here. He has murders stuck on his hands, and he will not be able to get rid of those. And then as a result of that, his pestered senses recoil and start. So imagine having your senses recoiling and starting and jumping about within you. This is a reference here to Macbeth beginning to lose control over his own mind. His guilty conscience is running away with him. And Angus and Menteith are aware of that.